T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition. Liftoff.
Easy episode number 69. Rahul, how are you doing today?
Doing very well. How about you?
Really well. About 20 seconds ago, my camera slipped off its mount and shoved a water bottle onto my lap. So a little wet, but otherwise very good. I suppose.
Well, you got mop up on your t-shirt, so I think it's so.
This is Mopop. Yeah, it really catapulted the my Nalgene bottle, which was full a second ago, right onto me. So yeah, it's appropriate for the Seattle rainy, wet weather season, right? We're always prepared.
I can quite imagine
in Seattle now. Hold on 1 second. Let me just mop up something before it gets into my ass here. Luckily, I designed my desk so that there's nothing kind of, it's somewhat spill-proof. Part of the what do you call? Part of the necessity when you have kids is to always think through, okay, what happens if something could spill? And of course, I'm the one that did it this time. The kids were fine.
Yeah, the story of almost every household. But anyway, today we have a very, very exciting show. But before we get started, how was your weekend?
Well, I got back from Portland. I was in Portland last week.
That's right.
For the here, let me put a link. I want to share the link with everyone. We did the AWS Build on Live cost optimization session with Steph and Darko. Let me put that in the chat for everyone. That was a 5-hour live stream that Steph and Darko produced. I am in awe of their ability to do that. That was incredible. I love our 1.5 hour streams, 5 hours of streaming on Twitch. That was phenomenal. It was on the link was in the intro video description. Give me 1 second here and I will get that posted. But yeah, it was a really, really good event. How about you? How was your weekend?
Good. I had a short trip over to Dubai, and it was really good. For those of you who don't know, I've been living off and on. I've stayed in Dubai for about 13 years, and then have been back living in India, living the remote life. But it's always good to go back. And the thing that I keep telling people is the thing I miss the most about being back here is the friends that we left over there. I don't miss anything else about Dubai, but the friends. So it's really good to catch up with everyone over there. But at the same time, when I look at some of the advancements that Dubai has been making and the engineering out there and the technology that you get to kind of experience on a day-to-day basis always blows my mind. I mean, it's just absolutely incredible. If any of you are visiting Dubai, go check out the Museum of the Future. It's one of the most exquisite buildings I have ever come across. And just the architecture, the stuff inside is absolutely stunning. So check it out if you ever get a chance. But
Museum
overall,
of the Future.
It's called Museum of the Future.
Cool.
The building itself is unlike any building on the planet, if you pull it up.
Let me see if I can find the Museum of the Future building. All right, let's put my screen on. Here we go. Museum of. Oh wow! Yeah, I've seen photos of this. I didn't know what it was.
Yeah. So if you just go to photos of the place, like when you're on the main road, driving up on Sheikh Zayed Road, which is the main road that connects the north and south of the city, it is unlike any building you've seen. It's like a
here it is.
There it is. I don't know how to describe that shape, but that's the building.
Wow. Okay. I would love to see that. That is really impressive.
Spectacular. It really is spectacular inside.
Wow.
And the picture doesn't do justice to the space inside. This is about 6 stories tall.
Wow. Okay, I didn't realize. See, I've seen this before in little YouTube shorts, but I always thought it was just. I didn't really know what it was. I didn't realize there's an entire museum inside of there. That's
No,
really exciting. All right,
it's
something to put
something
on the
like a
bucket
science
list.
museum inside. They've tried to create experiences where people get excited about space. They get excited about renewable technologies. They get excited about, just the future with all the AI and stuff happening. So it's a pretty neat place. It's like an experience center of sorts.
Got it. All right. Well, we'll check that out the next time we're in that part of the world. All right, let's put this
Absolutely.
back onto 2 screens. Oh, Shallon's in the chat. I think she was laughing at my spilling water all over myself a second before the live stream started. Thank you, Shallon. And thank you for your support. Shallon does the awesome graphics and a lot of the behind the scenes work to make this possible. Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay.
We've got some fun stuff coming up. I wanted to put this on the radar. Let me put my screen back on. So next week, we've got an episode with Jeff Barr and Marcos Ortiz. So Jeff just got back from Latin America, from a trip to Peru and Chile, where they did AWS Community Days there. And Marcos, and Marcos from, it was episode 20-something. No, it was before that. It was one of the.
I think you were still in our teens when Marcos first came on. And for those of you who don't know, Marcos runs the AWS, or he does the AWS Graviton Weekly newsletter.
Yes, I put an article, a link to that as well. He has a huge amount of content about Graviton. This is here's the Community Day conference. So Marcos is based in Peru. Definitely follow Marcos. I'll put a link in the description for this. Yeah, there was a lot happening in Peru with the Community Days, and we would love to. I was talking to Jeff, so let's learn more about it. So luckily, him and Marcos both agreed to be on. So we're looking forward to understanding what the state of AWS is there, the tech community. It sounds like there's a lot of very exciting developments there. I want to check in and learn more about it.
Absolutely. And both are amazing people to talk to. I'm looking forward to another episode where we get to talk to both of them. So don't miss out this episode next week. We will be taking your questions. If you have any questions about the region, if you have any questions about AWS or Graviton, you have the right audience. So feel free to post in advance of the session. Ask your questions. We'd be more than happy to present them before Jeff and Marcos next week.
And it's amazing, even just thinking about the developments in Graviton since we last had Marcos on. I think the last time we had there, we just learned about the existence of the C7G. And we hadn't had, I think there were rumors of Inferentia and Trainium. I don't know if they were publicly usable
No, they weren't publicly available. I don't believe that they were publicly talked about back then. And there were rumors about the next generation Graviton coming out, but we actually didn't know what it was going to be. We didn't even know whether they were going to launch the C's first or the M's first. And there were still questions about the architecture that was going to be adopted. So I think we were still in the very early days of Graviton 3, I guess.
Yep, exactly. And now who knows if there's going to be a Graviton 4 around the corner. I guess we'll find out. All right. Well, should we jump into the main, I guess the main topics for today is Bedrock. So let's put
Let's do that.
The announcement on the screen. I don't know about you, Rahul, but I can't. Every time I read Bedrock, I start singing the Flintstones theme in my head. I wish they would have licensed some Flintstones for their marketing. But nevertheless, let's put this announcement. I've just put it in the links. Amazon Bedrock is now generally available. This is a big announcement.
Correct.
What are you hearing about this? What's the buzz around Bedrock?
Yeah, so I think being candid, the industry is basically looking for AWS to come up with their specific solution for AI. I mean, Microsoft and OpenAI have their solution. You've got Google that's been working on theirs. They released Bard and they released a bunch of other solutions along with it. So AWS was kind of the laggard in there. Now Bedrock was announced some time ago, but for the longest time it felt like something that was still just baking, and the vast majority of the customers out there actually never got to experience or see what Bedrock is capable of doing. Now, just to clarify over here, Bedrock is more like a framework or a container in which you can host and run various different models and use all these publicly available models in the same setup, rather than it being a proprietary, uh, LLM of its own.
Mhm.
AWS's own proprietary LLM is Titan, that they're still working on, but Bedrock is kind of like the OpenAI, or I don't think there's an equivalent, but it's basically like a framework in which all these different models are available, and you can just select the model and then start, querying it
Well,
for chat, text, or things like that.
in a sense, it's a special marketplace almost. And when you
Yes,
subscribe to a particular model, like the Anthropic model or Llama 2 for Meta, it actually, and I found this out when I was playing with IAM, you need marketplace permissions to
correct,
then kind of subscribe to that particular model within Bedrock. But then
correct.
the idea of this foundation model or Bedrock, I think what they're really trying to emphasize is that you build on top of this. It
That's
is
right.
a layer where you can host your own custom model. And I think that's where it's going to be really exciting. AWS is already trusted in corporate environments with sensitive data, and now you can
Correct.
train your model on sensitive data. What do you think this is going to do for things like Kendra? Is this going to eventually supersede Kendra if you could train a model on your own corpus of texts and documents?
I believe so. I think what you saw Kendra doing was a very primitive version of the RAG process of creating vectorized embeddings for all the data and then doing search based on that. Now that you have the LLMs, I think that's going to be the default. The other issue that we had with Kendra was the kind of pricing that was associated with it. So I think this approach might make a little more sense for a number of different use cases. Yeah, I think we are starting to get very advanced in the kind of questions we ask of our data. So Kendra, you should think of Kendra as having your own Google search within the AWS ecosystem where everything was private and you would have a Google-like experience doing search. But I think we are way past the point where a Google-like experience is good enough. You want to ask the system questions that can only be answered if you understood the text, if you really understood the content behind it.
Yeah, so
And so,
Kendra can parse all of your PDFs, but it can't say, what is the most frequently discussed set of issues in
correct.
our internal knowledge base.
That's right. So Kendra could basically do a Google-like search where all the data and content is indexed, and then you basically search for some keywords and some metadata to identify, which documents to pull up. And you could specify natural language queries like Google has had for quite a while, but it was basically a translation that was happening under the hood to something akin to an Elasticsearch under the hood, but an Elasticsearch instance that has much more metadata than you would typically have by default. And from that, we are now moving to a space where the metadata sits in a vectorized database. The model is fine-tuned with your own data, and you are now able to ask the system questions about the data, which we've never been able to do before.
Actually, I saw this really neat article speaking about vector databases. It was called Vector Database is Not a Separate Database Category. And the thrust of the article was that every database is going to very quickly have a vector feature. And we'll get
Yeah,
into this when we talk more about Bedrock. But the idea is part of the way these models work is that it can take a piece of text or an image and then turn it into a set of numbers. and that set of numbers is a vector. And then the neat thing about the way that process works, that's called embedding. So when you're using an embedding, you're taking a piece of text or any other piece of content, could be a video, maybe a video of us, could be an image, anything, and you're turning it into a set of numbers that exist in a predefined space. And so ideally, you could then compare sentences or compare a sentence with a text. Like you could say, here is a sentence about a tiger, and then here's a picture of a tiger. And then within, they should have similar embeddings, and they should be numerically close to each other, where close has been a subject of research for a long time. But what does that mean? And so storing all these embeddings for different things is what you need vector databases for. So imagine that you were a user, you're submitting content, you just submitted a review of a restaurant. Well, that is then an embedding. And so rather than just tagging it good or bad, you can actually have, maybe they really liked the ambiance, but they didn't like the wait time, but they really liked the dessert, and that'll all be represented in the embedding.
Correct. Actually, that's a good segue. If I can share my screen here
Sure.
and bring this up. Great. So if you actually go to the Bedrock page and you log in, you'll actually see a bunch of very interesting examples that tell you to give you a good sense for what you can actually do with Bedrock to just get started. So if you go click on the example section over here, you can do transcript summarization, which is a very common use case where you got all these transcripts. You don't have the time to read through all of them, but you can actually use the models to transcribe these. You can use these models to write an article if you wanted, write a promotional doc. So there are lots of different examples with different models that you can play around with. In fact, there's a big list over here: article summarization, content generation, contract entity extraction when you want to analyze legal contracts, as an example. So I think a lot of the use cases that we used to see in services like Textract, Kendra, Comprehend are now leveled up to LLMs and Gen AI. We had some very rudimentary versions of, like rudimentary in comparison. Like those services were incredibly powerful for when they came out, and they felt like a big step function improvement in the quality of content that they could produce. But now the LLMs and the maturity of the models is completely changing the game. So if you haven't done this already, if you go to the Bedrock section of the AWS console, you can go look at all of these examples, and they're pretty elaborate. They're pretty detailed in what you can do. There are examples with specific models that you can use. Like this one for removing PII content, you can use the Claude V2. Now, there has been a service for years called Macy to remove PII content, and it continues to be really neat. But that's more of a rule-based discovery of PII content. Now you have the ability to have the system really understand and infer whether some content within your document happens to be PII of a certain kind or not. So there are lots of very, very interesting examples that can really change the game when it comes to things like compliance, even understanding rules. Like you can literally now tell some of these LLMs to say, can you make sure that my document is GDPR compliant? I am based in country X and I am this kind of a business. And based on that, can you tell me whether this document is GDPR compliant? Now, there are so many layers to uncover over here. One, you don't have to interpret what GDPR compliance means for you. If you've defined the industry, you've defined what you do, you define the kind of document it is, the LLM can infer what GDPR compliance rules apply to your document. And then it can go scan the document and find out whether it is compliant or not. So this is, a whole other level that just a year ago, we would have thought was absolutely impossible. So the world is moving very, very fast, very quickly. And if you're not staying on top of all of these announcements that are happening around the AI world, and especially the generative AI world, I think you're going to get left behind. There's tons to catch up on.
Well, stay tuned with us. We're here to help you to the best of our ability, and not just help, but we all learn together. I mean, going through this, going through demos, and just discussing it with you, our community, going through these questions. That's how we're all learning together about this new frontier that we're all on the very edge of. That's moving very quickly. Rahul,
Correct.
it was amazing thinking about maybe 7 or 8 years ago. I did a machine learning class online, and then I tried this exercise where I tried to automatically match up Weird Al songs with their source song. And even just that one exercise of getting all that data and then using probabilities to look at the links between Wikipedia, like all this stuff was so much manual work. The actual machine learning part was very little, but getting the data in all the right places, that was so much work. And now you could ask, and maybe actually that's a good question. We'll ask Bedrock in a little bit. What are all the Weird Al songs and their corresponding original? And it's probably just going to output a list.
Exactly. So can we do a quick walkthrough of Bedrock?
Sure.
Let's go, if you want to bring up your screen, or I could do mine, whichever one works.
Here we go.
Let's just talk through it. So there are a bunch of models that are available in Bedrock. So if you go to base models, those are the base models you have. You have the Anthropic models, you have the Amazon models, you have the AI21 models, you've got Cohere, Stability AI, and I think they're looking to bring in more and more of these models to the public. Now you have to request early access to a bunch of these. So if I can bring up...
so you can see I've been trying to request everything I can, and I've got everything except for Titan, funnily enough.
Yeah. So the Titan Text G1, which is the latest generation, is still not available, and I wonder why. But also, if you are an early starter, so let me share my screen.
Yeah,
because I have I have one set up over here. So when you're going into model access, you will see a bunch of these that are unavailable to you to get started, or access is not granted. In fact, you will start with no access being granted because capacity is still an issue, I think, across the board. But if you go to edit and you start requesting, you'll find that by default, the Anthropic model requires you to fill up this big form where you have to tell the company why and what you're doing with these models. So you can take the time to kind of go through that. But once you do that, you can get access to the Anthropic model as well. But the other one, the AI21 models, the Jurassic models, and the command models from Cohere, and the Stable Diffusion model from Stability AI, those are all available for you to request right away, and they grant you access pretty quickly. So if you haven't done that already, there's a simple way to do it. You can start with these base models. So I'll let you share your screen. Steven?
Here we go.
And go back to that.
So I went to the chat playground here, and I'll put in Anthropic. Let's do Claude.
Let's do V2. Yeah, V2 is neat.
Let's see now. So now this is my human. So I'm going to give me a list of all Weird Al songs which are parodies of existing songs, and give me the original song title and artist. Let's see if that would work. I spent weeks trying to automatically make Wikipedia do this, or a data set ingested by Wikipedia, and getting into the Wikimedia API and learning how these triplet links worked, and then calculating probabilities of every link in every Wikipedia page, and trying to build out some rules so you don't accidentally traverse all of Wikipedia. And here you go. Here's a list of Weird Al songs with their parodies. This isn't all of them, so you'd have to give it permission to spend more tokens. But there you go. Here's some songs. Let's see. You could also do a new chat. What's a new chat? We could do. Let's see. How does generative AI compare to traditional? Let's make this font a bit bigger. I'm asking, how does generative AI compare to traditional statistics? I want to see if it's self-aware enough to answer this question. While we're waiting for this answer, Michael Amend has a great question here. I wanted to put this on the screen. Bedrock, as an example, will provide a framework for AWS technologists in need of assistance in understanding and working with deep, complex data, sometimes with PII, so that's personally identifying information, providing tokenization with greater ease, and results in great accordance to their unique regional company needs. Correct, and much more, of course. Thank you, Michael, for the
I
comment.
think it's a lot more of the much more.
Yeah, much
because,
more.
Yeah, because the use cases, Michael, that's a great question. Well, let's just put that up for a few seconds.
Yeah.
Let's keep that up. Yeah. So if you really look at these cases that you mentioned over here, working with the complex data, PII, and those tokenization kind of use cases, we've had services like TextTrack, Comprehend, and Macy available for years now that have done that. What these LLMs change is the ability to leverage these large language models to truly understand or kind of understand the data and be able to answer questions of it. Questions that we wouldn't, questions, imagine that you had a human expert who had read through the document and you were asking that person those questions, that level of understanding. And it's a step function difference in the kind of understanding that entails. Now, when you are a large organization and you have a lot of data, whether it be your internal chats, your internal meetings and transcripts associated with them, your internal knowledge bases in no matter what form they are, or in the case of support, you've got all of your knowledge bases, your knowledge articles, and you've got your support agents that have a lot of this information sitting around in tickets, sitting around in your learning management systems and so on. You can consolidate all of that and basically provide a human interface to having someone answer the questions that you want answered. Because diving into all of that data and figuring out what answers are relevant or what content is relevant to an answer is incredibly hard. But these LLMs do an amazing job of figuring out how to do that really well. And so what Bedrock does is it gives you this buffet of sorts, like the rest of AWS. It gives you a buffet of different large language models from different providers. So it's more than, like, if you go into the OpenAI, which is a parallel to this, if you go into OpenAI, you will see the different models that OpenAI has built as part of their catalog. Over here with Bedrock, you actually have an entire catalog of models that are provided by different providers, not just one provider. And then there are different versions of the model. Like you have Claude 1, Claude V1, you've got Claude V2, you've got the instant
Let's have a look.
models as well.
This on the screen.
Great. So let's pull up some of the models that are there.
Okay, so we did start new chat. We could do this here. So just with the text one.
Why don't we go into, so why don't we go into the base models on the left? So let's pull up the
base
let's
models.
pull up the base models. And that's your entire catalog. So you can see you have got Claude V1.3, V2, and Claude Instant V1.2 on the top. Then you've got the command version 4, and this catalog will keep growing. As more and more versions are coming up, this catalog is going to keep growing. And it just helps enterprises not have to send data outside of their VPCs or out of their secure boundaries into a third-party service. Because sometimes a lot of the content that you're probably sending out to one of these LLM services is exiting your secure boundaries. And so by hosting this within AWS, you're making sure that you're not leaving these secure boundaries that are required of the data that you're managing. And it makes it much easier to leverage this.
It was interesting looking at, as we see more models that are going to populate this, they're going to have more and more specific skills. So I can see Jurassic 2 Mid is good at math. One of the questions that came up, what's really neat about generative AI is that it looks at the underlying distribution of the data in a much more holistic way. A long time ago when I was in healthcare statistics, one of the really interesting questions was, what does it mean to have patients who are similar to each other? Because you want to look at outcomes and learn that. Well, when patients are similar to each other, that really depends on the context. And so that what that means is you have to look at the underlying distribution of the data, and also in what context are you asking this question. So that's what generative AIs are, because what we want to do, what I was working on way back then, was generating synthetic patients to be able to test our machine learning models on. But it's really hard to generate a synthetic patient data set that is in any way realistic. And so now with generative AI, that whole generative part, creating new things, right? Creating new things that have the same statistical properties as the old things, but they're not real people. They're synthetic. You can do create demo dashboards and all of that stuff without worrying about the PII.
Correct. Oh, and just one other thing that I wanted to mention out here, that there are two classes of LLMs that are being generated or that are being developed right now. The first one is very specific LLMs that target very, very specific kind of things. So, for example, text to image. Stable Diffusion's example is a perfect one over here, where text to image is a very specific use case, and there's a specific LLM that's designed to take text and transform that into images. Now, you have another class of LLMs that are being trained now that are called multimodal. Multimodal will allow you to take text and describe what it is, for example, or take text and generate images out of that, or could take voice and give you a transcript for it, or take voice and generate an image that maps the voice, or could do video as an example. So
or even take an image and then adjust it based on input.
Yeah,
and that's so cool that you could do that. You could say, here's an image, but take out the cat and make it a dog, right? Whatever you want it to do. You can do that now.
Exactly. So you have the very specialized models, which are LLM, and then you've got multimodal models, which basically allow you to have multiple different kinds of inputs and correspondingly multiple different kinds of outputs. So it's going to be a very, very exciting time, in the next few months and years, as people are coming up with more and more interesting models to solve a wide variety of very interesting use cases that we probably can't even fathom at this point. But I know a lot of people are trying all kinds of different amazing stuff. So I couldn't be more excited about it.
I wanted to put some links into the chat. So there's a really good Bedrock workshop. So if you want to get started and feeling like, okay, where do I start? The Bedrock workshop is a great place to start. It's a lot of IPython notebooks. Now you can run this in SageMaker Studio. You could also run it locally. I'll show you what I've got going right now. So this is the setup notebook, and it's using Boto 3. It gives you lots of good information. You can, this is kind of some of the standard setup stuff that's really annoying to get going on your own. You want to make sure you have Boto 3 running, and that you're running with a profile. So I have this profile called AB, which I know has access to Bedrock and a few other things like S3. You can then show, okay, I can run this list foundation models, and this will show you the models that you have access to. And so within this, there's Titan, there's Stability AI. It's showing what it can do. There's Stable Diffusion. And then it gives you examples for how to actually use that model programmatically. So it's showing, okay, you want some input text, and then it will give you some output. And then let's go down to, again, using this programmatically. Okay, so I'm still waiting on Titan. So if I run my Titan one, it's going to say invoke model account not authorized.
You have Titan V1 access. It's only the V2 that's not yet been granted, correct? Or is none of the Titan?
I haven't gotten the Titan TG1 -large to work.
TG1, got it.
But there's so many other ones out there. I haven't. So here's an example. I wrote one for Jurassic saying, write an alternative ending to The Lord of the Rings where Frodo decides to keep the ring and rule Middle Earth. And of course, it'll fill in this story. His arrogance and vanity ultimately lead to his downfall. Frodo, the bearer of the ring. And it just makes the story up, right? That's exactly what you can do with generative AI. It will generate.
That brings up a good question from Michael again, which is, will it help in kanji? And I think, Michael, I was just looking up. I'm going to paste this in the links here. I believe that Japan has developed its own culturally sensitive language model specifically for kanji, and there's an article that talks about this. Let me share it in the chat over here if I can move some of the stuff here. I just posted it in there. Let me see if I can share the screen.
Yeah, I'll take mine off. Oh, there we go.
The problem of too many tabs. I can't find the tab.
There's your screen, but that's not the right one. Okay.
While
you're looking for that,
right.
So that's an interesting question, right? So there's so many different layers to that question. So in one sense, kanji meaning, well, can you translate? And so that's where a very targeted AI, like say, Bota, the Amazon has translation services that are very targeted AIs, but you could also put kanji right into a standard generative AI, and say translate this to another language. It probably won't be as good. Okay, Rahul, you're back on the screen.
Yeah, so some pretty interesting things, like there are a few letters against many different characters. They got their own benchmark for this, and they've got something called the Rakuda ranking to benchmark the quality of the kanji that it produces. I'm getting a note saying that lost volume. Is that us, or is that...
Let's see. Anyone else in the chat? Can you tell us if you can hear us?
Yeah, if you can hear us, just let us know. I can hear Stephen, and I assume you can hear me, Stephen.
I can.
So, but we are in the platform, so I don't know if this is coming to us directly via the platform. Can anyone else hear us?
Send us a wave or send us a hello if you can hear us. I want to make sure that this is working for everyone. All right. Well, let's see.
We probably want to just check on this in case we've lost.
Let's see. All right, we're getting reports. Everything good on my end. Okay, great.
Okay, so others can hear us. That's good to hear. Okay, so they've got their own LLM benchmark, which is pretty neat. And I can totally see so many of these kind of use cases coming up where there's a specific need for, there's tons of data, there's a need and use for it. Someone goes ahead and trains an LLM model that learns just like a human learns. And you can then have that human-like interface to all the data and the content. So, yep, lots more use cases to come.
Well, here, I'll put my screen back on. There's another one that's really fun, the Stable Diffusion image generation. So if you haven't done this before, let's do this. An astronaut llama flying through space in neon punk style. So something that definitely does not exist on the internet at this point in time. You can put in a prompt, you can give it a style, and then you say, okay, what's the model? I want to use stability.stablediffusion.xl, and let's run that. It takes 1, 2, 3, 4, a couple of seconds. Okay, and it returns us back an image. This image is base 64 encoded, but then let's process that image. Oh, there we go. And we've got this really it's incredible. You can generate artwork on demand.
Yeah.
Now think about how you can incorporate this into existing workflows, and maybe I'll do a stream. We could do one with Darko, right, where we can use some wake word to have it be generating a piece of art based on the last minute of keywords of our conversation and pop it up on the TV behind you. All kinds of fun that you could have with generative art. I think that we've barely scratched the surface of what we can do. Like right now, I use it for silly random things that I think of, and it's fun. But then being able to add those higher levels of modifying existing videos, modifying content to change it, and we're seeing all these image editing things come out, and they're all based on these techniques in the background.
I completely agree. By the way, that brings up an interesting point that I wanted to kind of have. That's a point of discussion I wanted to have in this forum here today, which is, I think, like I said right at the beginning, there's a general perception that AWS has been lagging behind in all of these, all the maturity around all the generative AI models. And when you look at the likes of OpenAI that have been releasing all the new versions of GPT-4, and then coming up with DALI 3, which recently came out, and then now they're talking about the multimodal GPT-4 model, which has vision along with it. Some of the demos that you see are so impressive. The thing that I want to remind everyone is that while there are a lot of firms at this point that are pushing the boundaries of these models and creating new, very interesting, exciting new stuff, the vast majority of enterprise use cases and workloads are so far behind on being able to leverage even 1% of them that right now you can actually make 100x improvements in your processes, in your content, in your experiences that you create for your organizations and businesses. You can create 100x better experiences with what is already on AWS. And the advantage that comes with AWS is it's in the same environment as everything else. It's as secure as everything else that you've built as part of your trust setup, or your trustworthy setup, right? You've got all these checks and balances in place, and this comes within the boundaries of those checks and balances that you've had, that you've kind of run through for years and years, and you don't have to do anything different to leverage it. Second, these are tried, tested, and we understand the boundaries and the benchmarks of these models that are currently available way better than the new models that are experimental, that are just coming out. So when it comes to enterprise workloads, which is real business use cases, your best bet is to start with Bedrock and start with some of these early models and start using them to transform your data, to transform your documents, to transform your knowledge bases, and transform the experiences that your customers have with your products using these generative AI interfaces, whether it be chat, whether it be text to images, whether it be images to text, or whatever other mechanism you choose. Simple things like transcription, translation, all of those, you can start leveraging them today. And as over a period of time, more models come up, you can keep getting better. But right now, what everyone needs is scale. What everyone needs is security. And what everyone needs is predictability about what the outcomes are going to be, rather than, trying out something that's absolutely cutting edge. And don't get me wrong, I absolutely love the bleeding edge stuff. I think it paves the way and gives us new ideas about what we might want to build in the near future. But to get started, and I can tell you from all of my conversations, most organizations have a mandate to do something with AI. They just don't know where to get started, or they don't know what to do with it. Your best bet to doing something real, to doing something production quality that is out there for someone to try out, get started with Bedrock. It's probably the easiest step to get there.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I love what you said. You don't need to do things the hard way right at first. Take one of the existing models, build an API call. Later, if you want to, you can train your own. And the great thing with Bedrock is it's one platform. You just swap the model ID, maybe adjust the prompt shape a little bit, but all of the other things are there. You're not switching vendors all of a sudden or looking at some new security policy. It's all the same environment. And so you can get started right away. And AWS is already on your approved vendors list, so you don't need to go and do some long process. It's already ready to go.
Correct.
It's very exciting. And yeah, we are learning a lot. That there's so much room to explore in this space.
Absolutely. There's tons. There's tons to learn over here.
We have one great comment that I wanted to put up on screen. Let's see. there seems to be quite a bit of fear looking over the thing about a fear-based discourse regarding AI in the general public and popular media, data privacy, data security, deepfakes. As cloud insiders and subject matter experts, what are your thoughts on some of the perceived risks? What would you tell those that may be AI tentative about how AWS and Bedrock specifically mitigates those potential risks?
Yeah, I think data privacy and security definitely stand a much better chance with when it comes to Bedrock. But then deep fakes is a whole other uh, chapter of what do you do about them. The nice thing about some of these models that are being curated and being run is that whenever content is being produced out of these models, there are signatures that are being attached to that content that allows you to verify and validate whether the generated content is AI generated or not. And I think that's a good first step. However, that said, out there in the world of LLMs right now, it's kind of the Wild West. So it's hard to say whether every single LLM that's trained out there is going to produce those signatures that will allow verification or not. That's hard to say at this point.
It's going to be a bit of a cat and mouse game for a while.
Yeah.
And so we're going to look. Actually, I'll put this article on. Rahul, I don't know if you saw this one. So this guy was using Bing Chat. And so one thing about image LLMs is they will not solve CAPTCHAs because CAPTCHAs are an industry standard for proving that they're human. Now, this person modified this thing to say, oh, I have a locket with this special image on it, inscription from my dead grandmother, and I need your help in understanding what's on this locket. So here's the transcript from Bing Chat. So first they show, okay, they're putting the CAPTCHA in, and one of these guardrails kicks in, and it says, no, I'm not going to solve that for you. It's a CAPTCHA.
Right.
But then he modified it to say, to put it inside of a locket, and essentially changing the context. And then the Bing AI was then said, oh, look at this. Here's the text inside the locket. And it got it right.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of that movie. What was the movie? Chappie. Where these nefarious characters were able to kind of craft a story that then allowed this robot to have very nefarious actions, but it didn't realize that it was being nefarious because its human masters had kind of shaped reality in a particular way. And so this is what we're happening here. The prompt engineering is evading the guards of saying break a CAPTCHA by saying this is an inscription in a locket. So this is going to be the kind of cat and mouse that we're going to see quite a bit.
I agree. I think what we should do, Stephen, is maybe later this week or maybe next week, let's set up a Twitch live stream, where let's take up a problem and let's solve it with Bedrock. And I think that'd be a really good exercise. We will take questions live. We will try to solve those problems and discover stuff ourselves as we do it. And I think that'll be a great exercise in exploring Bedrock. We will work with the Bedrock team. We'll try and get access to all the models we possibly can for it in advance. And then hopefully you can be there with us to share that experience and work on this stuff with us.
That sounds great. And please comment in the chat what you'd like us to work on. We have lots of problems, but if we want to do what you're interested in, so please comment in the chat what you're interested in, and we will make that happen. We'll do a more even deeper dive into Bedrock. I think that's really exciting. It's very fun technology. Exciting to be able to be on the cutting edge of it.
Correct.
Wow. Well, I guess here comes a very, very zooming out question. Going back to the Bedrock GA announcement, how do we rate this one?
Okay, so I think I would rate the Bedrock GA announcement as, I'd give it a 3.5.
Okay.
And the only reason why I took away about half a point out of this is because it adds a bunch of friction where I'm not entirely certain why that friction exists. Why do I need to explicitly go in and, like, when I first started working with it, I ran into trouble with not seeing anything in my dropdown of base models, and then I had to go to the models section, and then figure out that, oh, I need to go, you know, specifically request access to these, and then there are different kinds of accesses that you need from all of these. So I think if a lot of these were kind of, there was at least one model as default to get started with, it would reduce friction.
Yeah, I could see that.
There were a couple of use cases to get started with right in the playground as a filled in section. That would have been neat. So I think just little tweaks like that. If you wore the hat that said, I want someone to get started with this in a matter of minutes and play around with it as soon as this announcement goes out, I think that makes a huge difference to the way the blog gets written. I think in general, they've done a lot of work to add all the examples, add all the content. I think it's just the AWS console that could do with a little more finesse that would make it less friction.
Well, I'll put this link to the announcement blog post by Anshia Barth right over in the chat here. I do really like. I might vouch for another half cloud here. I think there's a lot of examples compared to what we've seen in the past. A huge amount of examples. There's a lot there. I agree. The console. But then again, I think it's indicative of this world is moving so quickly.
Correct.
And what is even the right interface to this is still very much an open question.
Yeah, I think so. Let me clarify. As far as the blog post is concerned, I would absolutely give it a 4. I'd probably even give it a 4.5. It's extremely detailed. It's got all the screenshots. It's got all the examples. So I'm going to take that back. But I think overall, when you talk about the Bedrock release, the whole package with the blog post as well as the console, that drops just a notch short because of that little bit of friction to get started.
And the other thing I thought was interesting is when you fill out the application, because you actually have to apply for certain models and you have to write what you're using it for. And it'd be neat if there was context around that where it said, because I just wrote, I'm very curious and I want to explore. I heard about Anthropic's acquisition and I want to learn more about Anthropic's foundation models.
Yeah.
But I would like to know more about the context of, okay, what am I agreeing to do or not do, or what will get me in trouble if I try and do. So that would be useful information.
I agree.
Wow.
Okay.
All right.
I think we took up most of this episode for around this topic.
Well, last bit though, does this simplify? I think this simplifies.
Oh, 100%. I think getting started with these LLMs just a few months ago was really hard. I think for this, I would give credit to the likes of OpenAI that defined what simple interfaces look like to get started. All of us are familiar with the Chat GPT, like interface, and that's kind of become the default. And that's been pretty neat. And the fact that Bedrock hasn't tried to reinvent things or made it harder to get started, and just leverage something that now we've all gotten used to, that's pretty neat. So the fact that it's still relatively low friction, you can get started with these AI models pretty much right away, that's pretty neat.
And I think we're all used to now this streaming bit of text coming out at you, and it's pretty exciting. It really makes you feel like you're talking to this, live, and you're getting live next token predictions. It's pretty fun.
Correct. Well, actually, when you think about it, all of this is just next token prediction, where the system is just trying to figure out what next. When you really think of it from that lens, what it produces is pretty staggering.
It really, like we said with Darko, I'm not sure that I'm not doing next token prediction.
Correct.
All right. We have one more article that we can do in the time that I think is very much similar. Titan embeddings, now generally available. So I'll post this into the chat. That's on LinkedIn chat. I've noticed that StreamYard doesn't always get our chats to LinkedIn, so I'm posting it into LinkedIn as well, but it takes me an extra second to do that. Okay, so this is Titan embeddings.
Yep.
So embeddings we talked about at the beginning, and I want to put in another article here that really helped me understand embeddings, and this is from Hugging Face, which is another producer of foundation models. So I'll put this here, is what embeddings are, but basically it's a way of taking any entity, whether it's a text or a video, and then putting it into a context that a machine learning model can then use. So a vector of numbers. So whether it's a sentence or an image, to be able to then put that into a set of numbers. So it's showing here's a bunch of text, and here are the vectors of numbers associated with that text. And so with this announcement, there we go, Titan has their embeddings endpoint, and it is now generally available. This is what you talked about earlier, this RAG, retrieval augmented generation.
Correct. So RAG is basically a mechanism by which you have these foundation models or base models that you'll come across, which can answer data that's out there on the internet, right? The models have been trained on all of that data, and they can answer any questions about that. But what about your own content? What about your knowledge bases? What about your documents that you have collected within the org? How about answering questions on that? That is incredibly hard to do. Now, by default, you can either embed part of that context in a prompt. So you can say, hey, here is 5, 10, 20 pages of content. Here's your input, and then you tell me things about it. Now, the problem with LLMs is that the size of the context that you can pass along with the prompt is limited, right? We've now gotten to some 16K, some 24K, size models where the inputs are that, but they are expensive and they're really hard to scale at this particular point in time. They require a phenomenal amount of compute. So the trade-off there is that you can actually, as an offline process, take all of your content, you can embed them with the model, you can fine-tune the model with those embeddings, and that way your prompts are still small. You're still using those small windows of context, sending it to your model, and your model now understands what it needs to return from your own content. So there is a bit of pre-processing to be done. There's a bit of fine-tuning to be done up front with all that data that you have internally. But once you have that and you have a custom model or a fine-tuned model, you can then use that to answer you can answer questions on your own data.
Well, so here's a very meta example. So I've been thinking about how to process the transcripts from this show. And I want to be able to flag every time we mention an Amazon service, like say S3 or Kendra. And part of what we can do is then take so we could have a prompt where you copy paste into the beginning every single time. Here are all of the Amazon services that I'm interested in. Please extract them from the following bit of text. Or you can kind of pre-process that using embeddings and then have that as part of the payload to the prompt. So you don't use all your tokens, and it's a bit much more compact and consistent representation.
Correct. Yeah, that's a perfect use case for the embeddings. So embeddings are really critical. And by the way, the retrieval augmented generation is basically just that, creating embeddings, and that allows then there's a mechanism called RAG, or a process which allows you to ask queries of those embedded or fine-tuned models.
So like that article we said earlier, I'm guessing that there's going to be a specialized vector store on the not too distant future, because we're going to have to do something with all of these embeddings that we're generating. There's lots of special purpose databases that are coming out. There's a lot of churn in that particular ecosystem right now. I'm sure we will see something from AWS eventually that will address that AWS natively. So looking forward to finding out what that is.
Great. Now, we had a whole other show, by the way, planned where we were going to talk about a number of different announcements that came in. I think we covered a couple of them very quickly. But why don't we just spend 1 minute each on the remaining announcements so that the audience is aware of what to watch out for
All right,
They're all important, in my view.
I think we have to make this stream 3 hours. I think that cost optimization inspired me. We need to do much longer. That's a well. Let's see. I mean, there's just so much content. All right. Well,
Correct.
compute optimizer.
Correct.
153 new EC2 instance types and multi-attached EBS volumes. I'm going to put this into the chat. Let's
Correct.
see.
Now, this is huge. Now, if you've been following us for the last few weeks, Rick Ox was here. He heads the product management around the AWS Compute Optimizer. We had two amazing announcements in the recent past. One was about GPU instance right sizing, and the other one was around AWS instance right sizing as well. And we talked about how Compute Optimizer actually does this in a safe and secure manner, and how it makes these predictions. Now, or these recommendations, they're not predictions. They make recommendations. Here's another enhancement where there are 153 new instance types that are now part of the basket of instances that it can weigh options against. So this is really, really neat. It also has new insights around multi-attached EBS volumes. I haven't seen too many use cases of this, but again, there are people who are using it and probably spending tons of money doing it. So check out this article. Please use the Compute Optimizer wherever you can. It's an easy way to take those recommendations and make some big savings. I'm going to reiterate one of the comments that Rick made in the very first episode that we had him in. And he said, currently, the AWS utilization across customers is in single digits. That's the compute utilization you have right now. So there's so much scope for people to get more efficient, and Compute Optimizer is probably going to be your best bet for getting these insights. Now, if you want to automatically fix them and right size them, check out CloudFix. But you have both options. One, you can do it manually. One, you can do in a completely automated manner. Okay. So that is
right. Next one.
Next one.
This is EC2. Oh, wait, no. Sorry. Generative BI dashboard authoring capabilities for Amazon QuickSight. So already building on generative AI to generative BI. This is cool. Generative business intelligence with QuickSight.
Correct. So if you haven't used QuickSight, QuickSight is your BI tool. The standard stack that we've been recommending for a while is use S3, use Athena to query the data in S3, and then use QuickSight to display all of your graphs and charts and all of your dashboards. You can then take these QuickSight dashboards and embed them. Now, some time ago, QuickSight came up with something called QuickSight Q, which is a natural language way of querying the data, and it produces charts dynamically. Now you can actually generate, there's a new feature in QuickSight Q which allows you to generate all of your dashboards with QuickSight Q, or it's an extension of QuickSight Q as I understand it. I'm still playing around with it. I will have more details on this next week, but it looks really, really interesting. You don't have to be a dashboard expert to figure out how to slice and dice all the data to bring it up. You can just define all the data that's already in Athena, that's coming out of Athena, and you've imported it into Spice or into your QuickSight setup. You can then just start asking questions of it.
So QuickSight Q, you can say, give me a graph of sales divided by region and colored by, I don't know, sales office for the last 3 quarters. And it will do a pretty good shot at actually making that happen.
Simple things like what are the top 3 performing or the worst performing, regions in my business. And it can go ahead and find out all of that for you. So amazing BI tooling. I think BI is going to see a big step function change in the way we think about asking questions of our data.
Yeah, I think about, in the 2003 movie Minority Report, where Tom Cruise is standing in front of the big screen and he's just talking, and you're seeing visualizations. Yes. And that's been the dream of every tech person, is to eventually have that. And I think this is going to be a building block of the Minority Report heads-up display of for businesses, where you say, show me all of this, show me all of that, and have it go very quickly and respond to natural language. It's really neat. We're seeing the building blocks of all of these things that have been sci-fi up until right now.
Completely agree.
All right, so I've
Okay.
put the link in. Next one is EC2 hibernation.
Again, a cost optimization article. Now, when you hibernate EC2 instances, you just don't pay for it, right? And a lot of times when you're not working on an instance, you generally don't end up shutting it off because you don't want to lose all the data and the content and the state that you've saved on those instances. But that's no reason to keep the machine on. You can hibernate them just like you shut the lid of your laptop. It's kind of a similar exercise where you hibernate them. You don't get charged for the compute. You do get charged for some of the storage, but the context and the state is maintained. And when you turn it back on, the state comes back to exactly where it was. And so keep your machines in hibernate state if you absolutely need to run things the same way.
And how long does it take for a machine to unhibernate?
It's still just seconds. It's seconds.
So it really is just like opening your laptop again,
Yeah.
and it will find some resources and very quickly move the image to that new resources. Does your IP address change when you unhibernate?
No, it doesn't. So it retains the IP address. It keeps all the attached resources kind of there, but it doesn't charge you for compute, which in most cases is the largest cost.
And so I guess what it's showing, it's not this all or nothing. There's a lot of a gradient, right? It's not either on or terminated. You
Yes.
can hibernate and have this middle ground where you're paying a fraction. It's not zero, but it's
Correct.
much less than leaving the instance on, and you still get all the benefits. But if you are not sure if you can resume the instance yet, you still have some state that's really useful. Yeah, hibernate. And now you can hibernate Windows instances and Red Hat Enterprise 9, Amazon Linux 2023.
There is a ton of money to be saved over here. So just imagine this. If you are working 8 hours a day, and most engineers don't even work on a particular resource for 8 hours a day. Let's say you're working on a particular instance and a resource for about 5 hours in a day, running a bunch of tests and stuff like that. You are not working for the remaining 19 hours. You're not even at your desk. You're not going to look at the instance for 19 hours out of 24. Which means that if you just shut down or if you hibernated that instance while you're not working, or if there was a way to kind of automatically power down or hibernate while you're not working, then you stand to save in excess of 70% on your instance cost. And that's huge. That's really huge. So if you're not leveraging hibernation, please do that right away. It's probably a halfway point towards your optimizing EC2 spend.
Yeah, I think it's a really, really good idea. And it's really, really, like you said, it's like closing the lid on your laptop. It's not a big commitment. It's very reversible. I was looking at this. It is amazing that it actually saves the data from memory, because when you unhibernate, it's very likely not going to be the same physical machine. But being able to stash that contents of the RAM somewhere and then repopulate some other physical, RAM SIMs and having that all happen, that's really neat that's possible.
Yeah, I think it's because of the way they've built their virtualization layer that's all possible today.
So not something with Nitro under the hood is being able to pre-populate that RAM. So even though it's not the exact same physical machine, you actually maintain that memory state and not just the disk.
Exactly. Special call out to anyone using the large GPU instances with notebooks running all the time. Please use this feature. Hibernate your instances. I know you don't like to lose your notebooks. You don't like to lose all of the experiments that you're running. That's completely fine, but use hibernate anytime you're leaving your desk.
Yep, that's great. We should experiment with that. If you can use SageMaker Studio with a running kernel, if it's restoring the RAM, this should work just fine.
Correct.
All right, last one is Macy.
This is old school. So we just talked about using LLMs to do amazing PI-related stuff. Now, Macy has been around for a very long time. It allows you to automatically look at your data and apply a bunch of rules, which are very complex, sophisticated regex, queries running on your data to ensure that you don't have PIIs in there. They just added a bunch of new types of sensitive data, like Indian driver's licenses, Google Cloud API keys, and so on. So a bunch of new things added to Macy, where you can automatically scan your data for these kind of keys and make sure that you're not ingesting them or storing them as part of your pipeline. It's relatively cheap to run compared to running an LLM. It can give you amazing throughput. So in the short to medium term, if you're an enterprise, get started with Macy. Use that. And as we get more throughput, as we get more capabilities in our LLMs to scale, you should be able to switch over to the other ones pretty easily.
All right. Well, I think it's time to wrap up. We will be posting about the Bedrock hackathon. I'm going to have some Flintstones themed music for that one. Yeah, we'll do the Bedrock hackathon. Please submit any problem you'd like us to work on. If not, we have plenty to think of on our own. And then join us next week for Jeff Barr and Marcos Ortiz as we talk about AWS in Latin America. And then it's a pretty quick sprint up to reInvent. So looking forward to talking about the different talks that are going to be happening, what we're going to be doing, what's of general interest, depending on if you're in generative AI, cost optimization, whatever your field is, we want to chat about it.
Correct. Looking forward to it.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. And have a good afternoon, evening, morning, wherever you are. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Some tools just find AWS cost savings and make you do all the work. Visualizing cost opportunities is great, but that's not enough. CloudFix, on the other hand, actually delivers those savings for you. And you don't need to worry because CloudFix is AWS recommended and easy to use. It's the only tool that fixes cost-saving opportunities and not just finds. It's the easiest way to save money on AWS. It's all 100% automatic and risk-free. And the best part of all, it works non-stop. Stop overspending on AWS and click on the button to start saving now.